I'm Mary Henderson, and this is my son Dale Henderson, who has autism and intellectual disability. He's 22 years of age, and we're here speaking to you today as ex-vaccination people, I guess, who Dale was, we believe, was injured by a vaccine when he was 20 months of age, and up till then he was a normally developing young boy. He's one of 4 children, and today we're back here years later, I guess, after having travelled the journey of deciding not to vaccinate, and here we are with him at the age of 22, and so you can see how life has turned out for Dale many years down the track.
Thank you for being so brave and offering to talk about Dale and your own family story. Can you tell me what happened?
Okay, well, Dale was born in 1993, and he's the second of my boys, another one who's 15 months older than Dale. And I was one of those mums who, I guess, equated good motherhood with doing whatever medical practice said we should do with our babies. And so he was born in North Shore Hospital. Yes, he was born in North Shore Hospital, and like his older brother. And we were probably first there to get our vaccines. In fact, I was probably early for every vaccine on the schedule. And when the flu shot became available for Dale, he would have been the first baby. I think he had his first flu shot when he was 6 months of age, because we were going overseas travelling. And he would have had another one on the same day that he had his MMR. And my biggest memory of that, when I, on the day, or within a few weeks of that, and looking back, the difference between him and his older brother, if you like, is that, do you want to sit here with us, or do you want to go up and see Maxine?
Go up and see
You go see Maxine, you can have your massage now.
Thank you, Dale. See ya. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Because he does have a brother who's 15 months older than him. When I look back and was trying to say, well, what is it that caused this change in his behaviour, which was very dramatic for Dale, because he had his vaccines at 18 months, and at 20 months was when we had this hospital incident. So it was a couple of months after that.
Yeah. And
I didn't put the two together at the time. I just thought he had got an infection. All I remember is that we were driving around this particular day, going to, we lived out of Auckland, so going to make the drive home. And it was about 5 o'clock at night, and he seemed to have this raging temperature, and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm not going to take him home and then have to rush into hospital somewhere later in the night. And so I took him to a 24-hour clinic. By that stage, he was projectile vomiting, and when we got him to the clinic, his temperature was so high that they started sponging him down, and he was covered in a rash. And at the time, there was a meningitis scare, and so that was every mother's fear, of course, that my child's going to contract meningitis. And that's what I thought, oh my goodness, perhaps he's got meningitis. So they called an ambulance, and he was ambulanced over to Starship. He had to have oxygen on the way, and then when we got to the hospital, it was like, there was like loads of people there. There weren't enough beds, if you like, because of this so-called meningitis scare. Anyway, they gave Dale a lumbar puncture. I held him while they gave it to him, because there was a shortage of doctors, and he couldn't be anaesthetised, all of those sorts of things. And he was put into isolation because everyone thought it was meningitis. And then and I must say, when I was having that thought, the thought that was going through my mind as a good mummy was that I wish they had a meningitis
vaccine.
Why don't they have a meningitis vaccine, and we wouldn't have to go through this, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the next day, and they said he'd probably be in hospital for 48 hours. The next day, they came in and they said, look, it's not meningitis, it's type A virus, whatever that means. We don't know what it is, but it definitely has gone up through the spinal fluid into his brain. And I had no idea what that meant. I just went, oh, it doesn't sound good, but okay. And so we went home, this was about, I think, maybe November, and we went home, and then he was just a changed child, actually. He went back to kindergarten. I put him into kindy early because he had an older brother, and it just seemed like a good socialising thing to do for him, and he was very social. He played with all the other children, etc. Except when we went back to kindy, that had all stopped, and all of a sudden he was too scared to go from inside to outside. He would walk around the perimeter of the playground. He was noise sensitive. He was scared to go down this little passageway. He was scared of the toilet. He started dropping all of his language, so he had quite a few words at that stage. Was very engaged. We've got lots of video of him as a little toddler.
And photos?
And photos,
yeah.
Lots.
Did he have any health issues but prior to this? Was he?
He had ear infections, which is, I guess, the difference between him and my older one.
And antibiotics and Pamol.
Yeah, and Pamol. Yeah. So he had lots of ear infections.
Did he have grommets?
No, he had those put in later, actually.
Okay.
And yeah, so Dale. So there was lots of changes, and then it was, I guess,
kindergarten. Did they see those changes as well?
Because
they would have been concerned.
Well, the owner of the kindergarten, I think I was one of those mums that there was probably all these changes in front of my eyes, but I didn't want to see them. And so, but it was the kindy teacher who's a good friend of mine, or we developed a great friend. She actually became one of his very first therapists, language therapists, and she said to me, look, Dale's a changed boy, what has happened? We need to call in a child behaviour team.
Yeah.
And then he was booked in from there to go to an ear, throat and nose specialist, and that Christmas all of our family came up from the South Island, and everybody commented that Dale had changed. It was just mainly social things at that stage, like the language had gone. But I distinctly remember on Christmas Day, you know, there's about 8 little boys all the same age in our family that were all together for Christmas, and everybody's having a great time. And that was from 2-year-olds up to probably, 4 or 5-year-olds. Everybody's there opening their Christmas presents. And Dale was in hiding under his cot. And just because it was too much noise, too much overload. So whatever had happened to him, either from the lumbar puncture or from the virus, the so-called virus that was in his spinal fluid, or from an immunisation, I don't know, that something had changed in my child. That's all I knew. And so always in my, I guess, what I always saw was that whatever happened to him, it was not part of his natural development. Whatever the label was going to be put on it, and we had no label at that stage, was something in that time period definitely changed for him. And I just saw it as a kind of something that either happened at the hospital.
What do you think about when they say, as in mainstream, would say that your child was born with this genetic condition, and that he was regressing and withdrawing and losing skills around 18 months and 2 years is part of that genetic condition?
Well, I guess because I've been around autism now for a long time. I mean, he was diagnosed just before he was 3 as autistic, but the symptoms he had, whether you put them in a box and call it autism, there was just a lot of things that weren't there before.
Yeah.
And so that was very clear to me. And
it's like a switch?
Well, yeah, it wasn't like a switch. No, it was like a damage had happened.
Yeah.
And so because there was physical things that went with that. Like he had, diarrhea for 2 years. He had, he never slept for ever.
Did he have that really acidic, putrid diarrhea? It's like it's on fire.
He was
and I'm asking you these questions because that's what my child had, and everyone I know, that's what their child had.
Yeah, he had a very disrupted.
It's like a burning. It's a burning diarrhea. It's acidic, isn't it?
Yeah. And he also had stopped eating lots of what I would call normal foods, and so he was just then having soft foods, and we had to teach him how to eat again properly and sleep again properly and do everything. He was scared of going. One minute he was scared of going in the bath, the next minute he was scared of going in the shower. All these abnormal sensory things, which made no sense to me because they weren't actually physically harming him, but to him, he was just so kind of out of whack, I guess. But yeah, I saw it. I guess my question was, I'm from a very large family, and so on one side of my family are 56 first cousins, all from Southland, and on the other side it's about 18. And not one of us has, in my generation, has autism.
Yeah, you've got a massive family.
Yeah, we've got a massive family. But in the next generation, and asking my parents, neither of them are here now, but in asking my parents and aunties and uncles, there were no autistic people in our family generations. And when I say autistic, I don't mean with a label, because that's often bantered around. I mean people that weren't in mainstream life, people that weren't going to school, holding down a job, living independently. There just weren't those people within our family. So this was something new to our family, let alone me looking at the community or, deciding whether we believe in something or don't believe in something. This was just something has happened, because there was not only our child who was diagnosed, but there's about I think there's about 6 within the wider family of my cousins who have had children whose kids are on the spectrum.
And so nothing above but all below on that family tree.
All below. So anyway, so then you go,
Who's the oldest one out of all those children?
He's older than Dale, so he's 25.
So something changed in your family.
Yeah.
From 25 years ago.
Yeah. So and then you go, and the change I thought at the time, because especially, I'm sure if Dale had been born with a condition, then I would accept it like any other parent, and that's the way it is. You love them anyway because they're their individual person. But when you've had a child who has their language and their character, and that's changed, then you do start looking around for what made the difference, because the first person you're going to blame is the mother, because it's you're the person who's in charge here, who's in charge of the care of that child. So you're going to question, is it something I have done? And so when I looked at all the areas, the thing that had changed between the oldest child and this child, I felt was and I could be wrong on this, but I felt was the vaccine schedule. I thought that when Luke, his older brother, was being vaccinated, that he was not having the MMR to a much older age, and I wasn't aware that you were having.
So what age do you know what age
I think at
Luke
that stage,
had MMR?
I think at that stage it was about, you had it when you were either 3 or 4.
Oh, that's quite a significant jump.
You certainly weren't having it at that younger age. So it just seemed to me like we were having a lot of shots. And then I guess...
And earlier, like more and earlier.
Yeah, but I was lining up for them. I mean, I was the one giving him the flu shot because we were travelling and doing different things. And so, and I was quite, so when he was first diagnosed, and then we had different people coming in to, have their say about what they thought about this child, who had obviously changed and had tremendous challenges. The thing I want to know, is this permanent, or is this like an illness that he's going to get over? Because if it's just an illness and we're going to recover, then, that's okay. But if this is permanent brain damage, then, I'm not a happy camper when it comes to this. And not only was I looking around for what has caused this, but I had a couple of professionals that came into my home that suggested it might be because my husband and I were in business and we're both very busy. And I do clearly remember the day that the very well-known Auckland paediatrician came in and suggested that if my husband was home more often, or I was not out being a business person more often, maybe. So
this condition was a lack of love then?
Yeah, and I, in my head, and I'm sure if it was my firstborn child and I was from a much smaller, isolated family, you would get suckered into believing whatever you're told. I was there with my friend who was actually the kindy teacher, and I distinctly remember kind of getting brave that day. Up till then I was believing everything a professional told me, and thinking, why is it then my eldest son is not affected? He's got the same amount of love. I'm not giving diminished love depending on how many children we have. And so I remember just standing up and asking the guy to leave the house. And I guess from that time on, deciding that we needed to make changes for our children. In other words, I was actually going to find out about what we were giving to our child when I blindly went along to to a health professional and got the little boxes ticked that I was actually going to ask questions, because in my mind it was, ethically, can I now front up and have the next lot of immunisations when I don't know, and I don't know, I can only make the correlation.
So Dale, he's 22. He would have been born in 1995 or 4?
No, 94.
94. So he was born in 1994, and by 95, in between 95 and 96, you've seen a regression after some vaccines.
Yeah.
And that's actually even before the Lancet study, isn't it? Did you have internet?
Well, that was we didn't then, and and then when we did get it, it was exceedingly slow. And then we went on this thing of
because a lot of us parents are told that we get this idea in our head because we've got the internet and we've been influenced by the internet. Which when I speak to the older parents and our older children, how could we be influenced by the internet if?
Right, exactly. And I wasn't. I was more, I guess. I guess what prompted me to get moving, if you like, I think I don't know how long we spent, but probably a month. I felt feeling very sorry for myself that I was now the mother of a child, whatever he had, because it was not on my wish list ever. It's not, I don't think it's on anyone's wish list. And kids like this are exceedingly hard work. And I was visiting someone today who's got a 14-year-old, not much different to Dale, who's homeschooling because schooling doesn't work out. We actually Dale went right through high school. He's always had support at school. Some paid for by the government, always topped up by us. Now he's an adult, he has good funding, which is great, and he has good carers in his life. But
I mean, he's 24/7 care, isn't he?
Pardon? Yes, he is. But he just can't. He can't go anywhere or do anything independently. It's just not safe. He doesn't have any comprehension. The parts of his brain that are damaged, and he's had an MRI, you can see in the CAT scans and things, the damage, it's just not going to repair. So whatever it is, it's permanent damage, and that's fine. He's, he's had.
So you've got mainstream medical evidence that your adult child has got a brain injury.
Yes, absolutely. And his diagnosis now is autism, intellectual disability, and he's had a breakdown, one breakdown through stress, and so autism in and of itself is not the hardest. Even though it's a spectrum. Yeah. We spent a lot of money, he had a lot of intervention very, very early on, and so he's made as much progress as he's going to make. So his behaviour and his able to function is fine, for him, that's fine. He's going to live a reasonably nice life. But it's only because we live in New Zealand. It's only because we're somewhere where there's funding for adults, there's support. He can be out in the community, which is fine, but...
And you're in a position as well, not all parents are in a position where we can add into the level of care being offered by the government.
Absolutely.
Because you've spent an absolute fortune.
Absolutely. I mean, we set up a school, I lived in Australia for a year to get him in some sort of, when he was little, packed up him and his brother, pregnant with the third one, moved over to Perth, had him attend a school for a year, and then we came back to New Zealand and with a group of other people set up a school via the Ministry of Education so that the kids could have a chance of learning some academics before they went into mainstream schooling. But all the way through school, he's had help to be at school, and the learning for Dale has been minimal. So, here we are.
Did he have any vaccines after that period?
No. And I just stopped from that day on, actually. And
you just knew somehow?
I changed my... I never say I knew.
Yeah.
Because I don't. And I'm not here to fight a fight on whether to vaccinate or not.
Yeah.
I am very grateful that we live in New Zealand. Exceedingly grateful that we live in a country where you can make that choice.
Informed consent.
I'm very regretful still as a mother that up until he had damage, I don't believe I made any choice. I believe I just followed the crowd. I knew nothing about what was in the vaccines. I knew nothing about how many you should give at once. I didn't know what having a triple vaccine or a 5 in a shot actually meant. I didn't understand about shared vials. I didn't understand about spacing of vaccine, and I certainly didn't understand about giving more than, a small number of vaccines into a little body. I had no idea about the implications of that, and I don't believe that the medical community or anyone does actually know about that. I think there's a lot of good that comes from vaccines, absolutely. I have no doubt about that. The medical history shows that. But now we've entered this era where that belief is translated into more is better, and that this little body can have 20, 30 vaccines is not the same as having one vaccine. It's just not the same. And it's not the same having just one vaccine as having 3 mixed vaccines in one shot. And it's not the same having a vial that needs 5, 10 other ingredients as the thing that's going to keep it sterile.
The preservative, yeah.
The preservative, as you put the needle in and use it on one child, and then you use it on another, and you use it on another, and you use it on another. And that's what I've been educated in. There's a big difference between vaccination working in the laboratory and the science of vaccination, and then turning that into mass marketing.
And there's a lot of contamination in the vaccines.
Well, it just is anything mass and cheap.
Yeah.
You're going to have side effects. And for anybody to say that there aren't side effects and there aren't children damaged is like I was. You're just not looking, and you've got your head in the sand. And the question, I guess, is the choice around when they made that choice to not enable the measles to be a single vaccine. I mean, when you go back and you look at the history in that, and you look at who was involved in making that decision, you look at why you wouldn't enable parents to do that. Why would you not have enabled that? Is a whole quagmire. It's just a mess that has, people need, if you're going to give informed choice, informed consent, you need to have choices. There shouldn't be just one choice and one schedule.
Well, they removed the single measles vaccine
at that time
off the schedule to actually force the MMR to be taken up.
Right, but that's as silly as then adding in a chicken pox and a whatever the next, you could put 10 shots in one shot. If we've got a compliance issue, which I don't think that, I mean, I just believe if you educate people then can make a choice. If you decide to vaccinate and I decide not to vaccinate, then we're not doing it based on the same reasoning. It's probably because you've got a very good reason why you are, and I've got a very good reason why I'm not, and they both will stack up. But education is the only way. Trying to get compliance through blind compliance is, I don't know, it just seems not fair. It's you're creating people who are not thinking. Because if you do believe that, the more vaccination, the better, then there's going to be a point where people just go, look, come on, you mean we're just going to keep adding and adding and adding to the schedule?
And the schedule's never been tested.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know how you can test it actually, but
yeah,
you know.
Because we wouldn't go to a doctor and be given 5, 6, 7 different drugs without a great deal of attention being put into what their synergistic effect would be together.
Yeah, well, I don't know actually. I do think that perhaps people don't do that, probably in lots of areas. I mean, so anyway, the bottom line with us is that since I sort of changed my thinking, went, okay, so we're not going to be doing vaccinating until I can see that there's a lot more care in the system. And so I haven't seen any more care. I haven't ever been to an information evening that's about where you can raise the issues and it not end up being a us and them argument, or, I'm the medical doctor, you must listen to me. I mean, that's just ridiculous in this day and age. You can't, the medical doctor is there to advise and to recommend. None of it is mandatory. It's the same as I wouldn't ever say to you, well, you've got a a whatever condition, it's mandatory that you take this. You would hope that you would make, first of all, some changes, and then if you need the whatever the medication is, then you have the right to, of course, take it. But you're not going to just blindly take something. And so all I've seen over the years is a lot of compliance, and that's that kind of like a stick. And I don't know, I just think, I have lots of relatives that ring me or email me and say, look, we've had a baby, what do you think we should do? And I just say to them, well, I can't tell you. I mean, you know our story, cousin this stories and cousin that story. You need to read and make up your own mind. And because we don't know, maybe in our family there is something that triggers. We don't know that.
Well, you've had your epigenetic panel done, haven't you?
Yeah.
And
and we've had, look, every test you could possibly have done, the Hendersons have done. We've had them done, and and you can read whatever you like into half of those tests. It just seemed to me that there is the possibility that some people can't be vaccinated because of their reaction to it, and we don't know who those people are. But if you don't look, we're never going to know.
No, and because Dale has the MTHFR, is that the double mutation he has?
I don't know actually. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah. But he, we've had other tests done to do with can you detoxify, and it's shown that he can't detoxify, and one other member in the family can detoxify, and it shows that the rest of us are fine. And I often joke and say that, say, look, I could walk through a disaster zone and come out the other side without catching anything. And there's a couple of members in our family without even, they could be a mile away.
What is that test that you can...
It's kind of like where you get you have a snip from each parent, and it makes up your ability to detoxify.
And that's different to the MTHFR?
I think it's similar. It's on the same chemical pathway, but it just means that you drop everything out the side. So when you take B6 or zinc, you actually can't. You don't.
Yeah, but that's the folate pathway, isn't it?
You don't metabolise it.
That's right.
So,
yeah, because they all have a B issue.
Yeah, and just taking more doesn't do anything because you still don't. Yeah. So I mean, we've done lots of things for Dale, but in my mind, he has brain damage that happened. Whatever that virus was, and wherever that virus came from.
Tested? Have they done a cerebral spinal fluid
since then?
Yeah, because they look at the virus in the fluid, don't they?
That's what they did with the spinal tap when he was 20 months.
Okay.
And that was what was in. There was a unspecified virus called type A. So he definitely had a virus that went up through his spinal fluid. Now the question was, and nobody knew at the time when I asked, and I went back because when we had his the titers done for measles, mumps, and rubella, and I had them done every couple of months through blood tests to see where they were at, because when they did the initial measles titer in the hospital, for the measles part of it was through the roof. It was way above the recommended,
that's not the only time I've heard that parents have actually had the titers done.
Yeah.
The African American boys that have reacted to the MMR have got really, really high measles titers.
Yeah. And Dale had very high for about 2 years, and they stayed high, and they didn't come down. And so my question to the hospital and the doctor at that time was, do you think he could have got measles from the MMR? Do you think that... And when I read about it later on...
Well, how else did it get there?
Well, I don't know, but years later when I heard about the history of the MMR and the Urabi...
strain that caused
increased
meningitis.
Yeah, and my question then to the Ministry of Health, but nobody's ever been able to tell me, was when they shipped that batch of MMR, which should have been destroyed, off to Brazil, did they also ship it to New Zealand? Did they sell some to New Zealand? And that was my question, because in Dale's age group, there is a group of boys that I see, and I worked in the field of autism for quite some years, delivering sports and...
So there's a little pod of them at the
There's
same age.
a pod of the ones that are very severe and appear to have like a brain damage with autism, which is different to kids that I see that come further on. So I don't know. But
there's a new research study that came out just at the end of last year, and it's been published. It was a young boy who regressed after his vaccines and went into all the encephalitis and chronic seizures, and he actually died.
Okay.
And when they autopsied the brain, they found the MMR strain in the brain.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wouldn't be at all surprised if that's what it is, and so therefore, then you go, well, am I anti-vaccine because of that? Well, I mean, I'm anti-vaccine if it was, poorly manufactured, if it was poorly administrated, if it's cheap.
Given too young.
Because the question will be if it, it was a bad batch and it was given to him when he was 4 or 5, would you have the same effect? So I'm not, I sit, I'm not here apart from to tell our story. Our story is what it is. I'm not imagining that I had a child who was normal up till normal.
And you're business people, you're well educated.
Yeah, we're well educated. I mean, we're not, I'm not trying to go out and protest anything. It's just, to me, it's buyer beware. It's parent beware. Don't be in so much hurry to vaccinate. There's, the things that people worry about, measles.
You had measles?
I had measles. I had chickenpox. We all went to chickenpox parties. We went to measles parties. I had a brother who had rheumatic fever who was told when he was a little boy that he'd never probably do sports. He's a phys ed teacher. He's amazing at golf. I mean,
there's that word, you will never, or
things are not always as bad as they seem. And what I do know from someone who is, I do know that good nutrition, good food, good water, good air, good housing, all those things probably matter as much. I really do. I think, your health is a lot more, we take a lot more notice of, we don't need a lot of highly processed, mass-produced foods for the same kind of reason. You get what you pay for. So, and I think living in New Zealand, I just think we're very lucky that we're not people here aren't so stupid as to think, I mean, I'm sorry, but when I look at Aussie, I just go, are you for real? You're going to put education and medical beside each other and try and use one as a leverage? It just seems so archaic and, dare I say it, so American, like wielding a big stick. We don't operate, as far as I'm concerned anyway, I'm proud to be a New Zealander and I think we're very individualistic. We are the nation that stopped, and nuclear coming here. We can, as parents, we should be able to, have good quality, whatever it is we're going to have, healthcare. And if we ask questions around that, why should we not? Maybe we need to be a country that is like a lot of Scandinavian countries that just says we're going to keep the schedule, whatever the schedule is, we're going to keep it to under 12 shots. That's what we're going to do. Because there's good research to show, or there's some research, I don't know how much research you need to call it good research, but there's good enough research to show that in countries that have 12 or less shots, those countries have overall better health than countries that get above that and can still put a lot of money into health. I don't think it's a money issue of what a country can afford, because you only have to look at America, who spends 3 times the amount that New Zealand does on health and has one of the worst child mortality rates in the Western world. Yeah, they do. So, and they, So,
says it all.
Yeah, this is not simple. For people who want it to be simple, they want it to be, I'm for vaccinations, I'm against vaccinations, I'm sorry,
That's why it's such a controversial subject. But
it's complex.
But that's why we want to have a debate about it. We want to talk about this more to try and get to the bottom of what is happening to our children.
Yeah. Well, you know what I'm a believer in more than anything else is? I'm a believer in is give people a choice. Educate and give people a choice. If you gave me a choice of, my husband and I are just going overseas actually for a month, so we're running away from all our children for a month. And when it came to going to Africa, there was the thing, because I haven't been confronted by this for years. We're going to Africa, okay, here's the list of vaccines.
Yeah, I've been to Africa and I got all those vaccines.
But we don't actually need them now, because none of the zones are... So we're going with friends of ours, and our friends who, we're going to the same places, they don't need the vaccines, but they've decided to get them. We don't need the vaccines, we've decided not to get them. Now, are you going to make a big debate about that and say, well, you can't, there's no mandatory ones. So are we going to have a big debate and a big carry-on about it? No, they've made an informed choice. We've made an informed choice.
What's best for your health, your family, your genetics, your
Exactly.
family history.
Exactly.
Because we're all individual.
Yeah, and that's fine. And it's just you're not going, I do think, but if you're going to give choice in the system, you need to have some choice. At the moment, we've got one choice, and one choice is cheap, mass-produced vaccines. And
which the safety data is highly questionable.
Yeah, I'm not going to share a vial. I'm sorry, I'm not going to share a vial. And
so, tell me what's the future for Dale?
For Dale, for Dale is, I've been a bit of an advocate for Dale for years with our local MP, who used to be Mr. John Key, and just for years and years and years we have talked about when these guys grow up and become adults. And here we are now. We have an adult son who didn't get better despite all the intervention that we did. He's as good as it's going to be for Dale because of his brain damage.
Mm. He seems very happy.
It's very happy.
And his health is good?
His health is good. His health is great. His health is great.
Because the most important thing is that their health is good. They're not suffering in pain.
No. And his all his issues he had with his bowel years ago, they did take about 6 or 7 years for that to come right, and we have.
No, and that is with a lot of work. I know.
A lot of work.
That
a lot of diet related. Now he's on a normal diet again, like a good. When I say normal, my kids roll their eyes and say, "Normal, mum," which for us is good, healthy.
It's a more relaxed diet.
Non-processed, good, healthy food. Yeah. We have our own garden. We're very, aware that what you're putting in your mouth is really important. So we're quite aware of that. They still have lots of junk food and stuff, but it's in balance. And so he's healthy, and
he's got an older brother and he's got a younger brother.
And a younger sister.
And a younger sister.
Yeah. So we're here. And my kids, as they've grown up and they've all got their opinions on vaccines now, they're not the same as ours, necessarily. Yeah. Because, when someone goes through the school system, especially if they've done sciences, then there's absolutely no way you can go to medical school or do a science degree and not come out thinking that vaccines are
that's part of the education, is to make sure they slip it into the education.
And so they should think that. But from there, they need to make an informed
look at the other side.
And look at the other side and look at that a lot of history is often rewritten.
Yes.
Later on, because history, you have to look at other factors that were going on at the same time. And so, I've looked at the whole history of vaccinating, and there's different views that you can have. Some of them are very dramatic, and there's this big piece in the middle. But usually when we're looking at that, they were for very serious illnesses. Now we've got this huge vaccine schedule that 3/4 of it is not for serious illness. I'm sorry, it's just not. It's almost like saying, well, what else can we invent here? Yep. What else can we put in the schedule? And it's not necessary. And so that's all I say to my kids is,
it's like overkill.
Yeah, it's like you make your own mind up, but you don't have to get everything. You don't have to take everything. You don't have to take everything on the menu.
We've kind of ended up in a society where we're being, educated to think in fear.
Or think that we've somehow got it all under control. I do think probably the antibiotic thing has maybe given medicine a bit of a scare, where we've overused antibiotics, and now, I've got an 11-year-old. If I take her to the doctor and say, she's got an ear infection, can we have antibiotics? I know what he's going to say. He's going to say, no, you can't. You go home for 48 hours and then come back. We're not going to. Whereas in the day with Dale, when I take him to the doctor with an ear infection, first sign of it, I was trained as a mum. First sign of a little sniffle or a little ear infection, I was there, and the doctor, me coercing the doctor into giving us antibiotics because it made my life easier. Now the doctor, I remember the first time, because I went with my 11-year-old when she was about 7 with an ear infection. She was unhappy. And the doctor said no. I was like, What? He said, well, no, Mary, because everyone's using too many antibiotics, and
Yeah.
you want to save antibiotics for the big things. And so I guess my message on that is maybe, just maybe, I don't know, just maybe vaccines are the same. If you just keep piling them on in there, eventually, maybe a lot of what's happening, who knows, I'm not a scientist, maybe a lot of what's happening is that quite a few of them become ineffective because there's just too much.
And the issue with the antibiotics that we're all aware of is making it very clear to us all that science is never settled.
No.
And so we're still learning what is going on, and what the long-term consequences of using something is. So
yeah, and I just think it's a bit folly. I mean, there was that quite famous now study, I think, in Australia, wasn't there, with Aborigine, and so they went out and gave the shots to Aborigine kids who were very low immune systems.
1 in 2.
Who died from it. Well,
there's the book 1 in 2.
Yeah. So I mean that, and when I read
it was
that,
every other child died from vaccine.
Exactly. So that, so what you need to be aware of is you can't go into a population and think, okay, these, if parents bring your children, we'll vaccinate, that's the end of the earth. I mean, what has to happen is good nutrition, good health, good housing, all the things that are good public health measures have to be put in place
first,
and continually put in place, and vaccines are never in place for those things. And so I think you'd see the schedule reduced dramatically if we did that, and there was some, I don't know, it's just a bit much. And I guess for me, I'm a voter for single vials and spread them all out, and definitely as a parent, would I be giving vaccines before a child is fully socialising and talking? No, never. Those things are vital to a person's life as an independent citizen.
So you want to see that first before you went anywhere near your child with any pharmaceutical.
Because the difference, even with
so the younger brother and the younger sister, did they have vaccines when they were older?
No, they haven't had any. I stopped vaccinating that day because I was unsure of what had happened.
Yeah.
And because that's never answered for me, and it's never, no one's from health has ever wanted to engage with me. I'm not here to have an argument. I'm not here to defend.
This is your story.
This is my story for my family's health. If you will engage with me on it, and if you will no one's come to collect the story and say, here's a child who the parents believe was vaccine damaged.
And we do need to collect that data.
It's on all his doctor's records because we make sure it is, but nobody's interested in that information when they're making decisions on the health of this country. So, yeah. And I mean, I've got good friends who are, we're diametrically opposed in view, and they see the whole issue of herd immunity, that we're not doing the right thing, and I just have no belief around herd immunity. I think is is weak science, and it's not.
The system is asking us to offer our children a sacrifice and be collateral damage to protect herd immunity. And if it is only the odd 1 or the odd 2, and they say 1 in a million, but until they listen to us, they don't actually know what the figures are for collateral damage, because
exactly.
This is not 1 in a million.
Yeah, exactly. It's not 1 in a million. It's a lot higher, and maybe it's going to be like I always remember my father, who would be, I don't know how old he would be now if he was still alive. He'd be in his 90s, I guess. Gosh, how time goes by. So he would. I always remember he's a school principal and school teacher, and I always remember my father as a youngster. I don't know how old I was, maybe about 16, caught smoking for the first time, and he smoked. So what could he say to me, right? And I remember him saying to me, being so angry, and saying, look, the difference is that in our day, the doctors, the health professionals, we were told to smoke. We were told, for stress relief, have a cigarette.
And I'm only laughing because I have seen all the posters, like the doctor promoting the Camel cigarette.
Yeah.
Have you seen the poster where the pregnant woman that I like, I like smoking because it makes my baby smaller because, it's easier to deliver my baby, that type of thing?
Yeah. So, and then I remember him saying to me, getting really angry with me as a belligerent teenager and saying, but all the data, all the science is out there to say that it's very bad for your health, and yet you're making this silly decision. And I always remember thinking, oh my goodness, but they're still, it's fine. So all I'm saying is sometimes health makes big mistakes. And I'm not saying with the whole immunisation schedule, but something needs to be looked at. That's all. And you can't, because they're going to look back and say, like they have done, they're doing now with the William Thompson thing, and saying there is a population, Black American boys, that are more affected by this. And who knows what the tipping point is where you go from typical, normal, what I used to call normal, in PC language it's typical, to no longer able to be in, like someone who can hold down a job, go to school. What is that point in that person's body? And we've all got different...
The threshold.
Yeah, we've all got different genetic markers. We're all different. We are all individuals. And there are groups of people that maybe, as there are susceptible to any disease or disorder, maybe there's one for what's in the immunisation schedule. Maybe it's an ingredient, maybe it's the combination, maybe it's the amount.
Yeah.
The thing is, nobody knows, but until we actually look...
And listen to the parents.
Till it's okay to look, until everybody can stop defending what they're doing or not doing and actually look at it in a sensible way, we can't move on. We can't move on. You're not going to have more people become compliant just because you're going to put some little measures in place. All that happens is more and more people disengage, and then they stop going to the doctor for everything. Because if every time I go to the doctor, I'm going to get
the trust is lost, isn't it? The trust.
Yeah. Whereas my doctor's been great. He's always said, it's in our notes. And
Okay.
so they've always respected that. I've never had an issue. I mean, because Dale's older, and you may have experienced this as well, because he had not seen, much autisms at that stage, because there weren't that many kids around. So whatever we wanted to do with Dale, or everything was new. There was no paint by numbers system. It was just, well, let's try this. All new to him, all new to me. And he'd say, well, look, you're obviously reading a lot about it. As long as it's not going to harm him, why wouldn't we try this? And so he's always been very open with us. But that's not what I hear now, because parents now go to the doctor, and I guess because they're dealing with lots more kids, that therefore it becomes less about our child and more about the group. So
it's interesting that you say that when Dale was younger that there wasn't the autism.
There doesn't anywhere. It was unusual.
Us older parents are the ones that actually know the truth, because the younger ones are being led to believe that it's just better diagnosis.
Right.
Do you think there was a load of Dales running around undiagnosed?
Well, you only have to use, I guess, common sense and look. And our family is a good example of it, because
your family is a good example.
You only have to ask the older generation, were there any kids who couldn't go to school because they were disruptive, or because they were couldn't learn? Were there any kids in the family who couldn't learn enough to get a job of any sort? Was there anyone who always had to have someone with them because you were worried that they were going to run off or get lost or not be able to say who they were and what their phone number was? Were there any kids like that in the family? And trust me, I asked my parents, I asked every relative, was there anyone? No, zero. So I don't think so. I think you could I've never looked at the autism diagnosis.
And your father, he was a principal.
Yeah, he's a principal.
So he would have seen it through the education system.
Absolutely.
And if he was sitting with us here today, he would say that there wasn't those children in the school.
It wasn't. It was really unusual. Very, very unusual. And I mean, I had, I think, a second cousin, one who had Down syndrome, and that was, for our whole family. And I think if you look at the figures, you would see that, I don't think it's better diagnosing. And autism is just a collection of symptoms anyway. It's not a...
Yeah, how do you feel about that label?
No, I don't worry. I mean, for me, for us, it was never the issue. Autism was just about, you know, okay, there's going to be certain behaviours here, and we need to get those.
Because it is just a label that it explains nothing really, does it?
The thing for Dale is the intellectual disability. That's the big. That's the one that's the life changer for him. Yeah. You know, because you could be, you could be autistic, and you know, there's lots of wonderfully talented autistic people that are working in creative industries, unbelievably, but they're fully verbal, fully whatever. But when you have that intellectual one as well, which means you can't, you know, you can't. It's just different. You can't. There's parts of his life that take someone else being there.
Yeah. Well, he's always going to need you. He's always going to need care, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that for a country is, I don't know, very expensive.
A burden in itself, isn't it?
Burden. It's a bit. Oh, it's expensive. Oh, are you kidding me? It's expensive. I mean, it costs the country $1 million a decade to keep my son.
Wow.
That's what they pay.
And the taxpayers are paying that?
Taxpayers are paying it. Because I'm not going to be around. It's not like, you know, people will say to me, and I mean, I've had two parents that needed, you know, the last few years of life needed some form of care. And how stressful that is on a family. Are you kidding me? You try it when it's going to be for 40 or 50 years. Because it doesn't change day by day. It's the same. It doesn't change. We have, you know, it's huge. And so you can't, you know, for a family, the government now has made that with adults easier, so we have full-time carers. But without that, it's not going to happen.
You're kind of stuck in a time warp from day one.
Yeah. Well, David is. No, he's not going anywhere with this.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the first probably autistic man with an intellectual disability to go to Unitec, but with a full-time carer, because normally that's the dividing line. If you need someone there with you, if you can't get there independently, you can't attend. They made an exception. So he's been lots of broken, lots of ceilings, if you like.
That's
because
great.
We've wanted him.
He's kind of holding the lantern for other children coming through.
Well, we've turned up to mainstream school because I see it as a right. It's my right, his right as a citizen to have a mainstream education. He would have been no better off in a special school. There was no advantage to him going there, or we would have been there. And so we chose mainstream schooling. We're choosing to be in the community. He's got his own little cooking business 2 days a week with his carer. He attends adult swimming classes, which we've put a class on. He goes to drumming. He's got a nice life, as he should have, because whatever happened to him way back when he was that little boy, he deserves to have a good life. And so, you know, I'm grateful.
He deserves to have the best.
Yes, I'm grateful we live in New Zealand for that, and I would just be heartbroken to see New Zealand go down the same trail as Australia and America. I mean, I don't know what you call that, but it's not called democracy. Democracy is where you get democracy doesn't mean the biggest group wins everything. It just means you've got the freedom to make a choice, surely. And so everyone needs to be considered when we're putting health policies together. And they need to collect the data. Look at all these. They need to know what these stories are, because they're not... We've got better things to do than sit around making up stories about our kids.
Yeah.
Much better things.
I know.
We just happen to be here because we're the ones that this happened to. So, and you don't want it to be someone else's story. You want it to be better for someone else. And
yeah, because how do you feel about the younger mums coming through now?
I just feel, you know, there's... we're always lucky because we always worked for ourselves, so we never had the pressure to have them in daycare, to have the kids...
yeah, the mums do have that pressure, don't they?
Yeah, and so if my kids ever have a sick day, which I must say they never do, which is, in fact, we have wellness days off school because they never get the flu, which is hilarious, actually, since we started actually taking responsibility for their health. It's interesting, that shift. So they always had wellness days off now, and they have their birthdays off school. I've done that all the way through. And
you might start a new trend.
You might start a new trend
across New Zealand. Wellness days.
Exactly. exactly. And it feels good to be healthy because
it's like a day off celebrating your health.
Yeah, because because they moan because other kids get days off being sick,
and then
it's like all kids, so they don't want to miss out.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I just think it's you educate people. But I've never had the pressure of having to have a well child, getting the flu or whatever, and have them because I have to be at work. So when it comes to the whole thing with the flu shot, we don't have that issue because if one of my kids, I don't believe it stops the flu anyway, but if one of my kids had the flu, we would take the day off school. It's no big deal. There would never ever be the pressure. And I think a lot of people are that lifestyle choice is, there is pressure if you haven't got the kind of the luxury of being a mum that's able to put your kids first. I mean, a lot of Scandinavian countries, it's not looked down on, and you would get a boss would get in a lot of trouble if you put pressure on someone who couldn't take a child's sick day, not a parent's sick day, but a child's sick day because
it's family first.
Yeah, it's family first, and if people don't have all those pressures, then
So, do you want to sign a heart, Mary?
Yeah, I'd love to.
For your precious Dale.
My Dale man. Okay. Can you see now?
It's gone pretty dark. That's what I thought. Oh, yeah. And if you put his the vaccines he had and his diagnosis as well.
Okay.
So he's number 216.